This week we're going to study and paint white flowers. And as you might imagine, since we do not have backgrounds on our illustrations, white becomes something of a challenge because a white flower on a white background very easily disappears. As you can see on this particular flower, which is a Syringa oblongata, it's a very small flower, and what the artist has done in this case has used the foliage from the flower to create a background. If we just move this a little bit, you can see that the flower stem is different from the leaf stem, and the leaf has been positioned in such a way to actually frame the white flower. Here's another painting of white flowers. You'll notice that the shadows along the edges of the flowers help to define the flower. So, that said, there are three ways that you can work with white. Basically, it's framing the flower with foliage from the flower. The other is to create light shadows that define the edges. And the last thing that can be done, you can use line to define the flower, but the line has to be a very subtle line. It cannot be an outline. In the case of this white Asian lily, you can see where there are edges that have been created that are disappearing edges. The line is drawn, and it isn't just a straight outline. It's a very delicate changing line that moves and blends into the shadow area of the lily, which helps to give it form. Where you have a light lily edge, just a line helps to define that edge from the background, and that helps create some of the form. You'll notice that the darkest areas on all these are in these dark pockets where the petal goes deep into the flower structure, and you can get away with some darks in that area. Now, the other thing that happens with white flowers is that very often the shadows in a white flower will be a reflection of the surrounding area. For instance, in this area here, you'll see that there's some green in these shadows, there's some green in these shadows, and it's the color that reflects off of the leaves. You might have other colors that you'll see that are reflections of surrounding areas. We don't know what they are in the case of this painting, but certainly the colors seem to help the painting create a certain amount of richness. Right. Since shadow colors are so important to white flowers, let's take a look at some botanical grays that you could potentially use in order to create form with the white flowers. This first one that I've mixed up, and this is in your chart on your assignment sheet. This is Prussian blue and Scarlet Lake. So let's see what that looks like. Get rid of the puddle. And you can actually thin this down quite a bit. And really, you're going to be using these shadow colors for both light and dark colors. Put a little bit more darkness on the top here. Pick up that puddle. So this is Prussian blue and Scarlet Lake. Now the next one is our traditional combination, which is ultramarine, permanent rose, and a little bit of cadmium yellow light. So that's what this one looks like. And you can see they're very similar. The mixture of the three pigments really gives you a much more grayer look. So we'll label this is ultramarine plus permanent rose plus cad yellow light. Now these colors can be modified. I don't believe that the Prussian blue and Scarlet Lake mixture can be modified too much without it either going too purple or too blue. But with the traditional ultramarine blue, permanent rose, and cadmium yellow, you can have this bias towards a shadow that reflects possible colors that you see in the white flower. So for instance, we could take this ultramarine and add just a little bit more blue to it. So this is a little bit more blue in that shadow color. See the difference? So you might like this better. If this is your well-balanced botanical gray, you can lean it towards the blue. Let's take this, and remember with the ultramarine, you do have to mix this color up, otherwise the blue is going to settle on you. Let's take and put just a little bit of more of the permanent rose. So now you've got a shadow color that leans towards the warm red. The last one we'll do, we'll take just a little bit of cadmium yellow and mix it in to our botanical gray. And you can see now this gray has a bit of a yellow cast to it. So many years ago, I had mixed up a giant tray of botanical gray. This was happening when I was doing my project for NYBG. And I don't know what I'll do after I run out of it, because this botanical gray is probably one of the nicest. That I've ever mixed. And Lord knows if I'll ever be able to mix it again. So if you mix up a gray, make sure you get a lot of it, because then you can use it for a multitude of things down the line. So that's the story on these shadow colors for white flowers. And of course, you're going to be using them in very thin washes and overlaying them as need be. But you can put them into a particular range to assist you. This yellow is already quite light, in getting the colors that you need for the subject that you're working with. So I would definitely do these tests and make a record of what it is. So this one is a little bit more plus ultramarine blue. This is plus permanent rose. And this is plus cad yellow light. Now you could try it with the lemon and see what kinds of results you get. Certainly you're going to have, with the Prussian blue, it's probably going to go much greener. You can try mixing the blue with the permanent rose. Actually, let's do that and see what we get. And it gets a little too purple. So the reason being is that we don't have the yellow, which the Scarlet Lake bias has, and we only get violet out of the project. So this is not going to work, but you might be able to add a little yellow and see what that does to it. This is the Prussian blue with permanent rose and a little bit of cad yellow. Getting better. Let's try a little bit more cad yellow. See what that does to it. And that's not too bad. It's a little warmer gray than the ultramarine, but it might be a color that you like. So there are all these different mixes that you can experiment with. You're going to get some sort of a gray every time you mix the three primaries together. So depending on the primaries you happen to have in your lexicon of pigments, you could come up with all kinds of grays to answer the questions that you need when you're painting.